Good morning, everyone. This is Dayna Wilson with Keller Williams Realty, Seniors Real Estate Specialist and Certified Senior Housing Professional and host of the Savvy Seniors Living Seminar Series. And we are getting close to the end of 2021. I cannot believe it, but welcome to the November seminar. And just some little quick housekeeping before we jump in. Just a reminder that next month, the last topic of the year is actually going to be avoiding disaster. Proper planning prevents disaster. We're going to be talking about trusts and wills and taxes and finances. And I thought that would be a great way to tee us up for the new year if we have some homework to do over the holidays in preparation for those things. But today, also, I wanted to give you some good news, and that is that starting in 2022, we are going to be back live and in person at the Lafayette Library. And we're so excited about that, to see everybody's smiling faces in person, greeting you at the door. And I just think there's just more energy and interaction when we're all together. And I think we just missed that socialization, right? Seeing other human beings. And good news about changes in the mask protocols. So we'll see how that all pans out come 2022. But I want to call out the wonderful, amazing sponsors that we have that have allowed us to continue on now in our 5th full year. And so the platinum sponsors, which are very special people, include Byron Park Senior Community, Merrill Lynch, and that's the Morris Group at Merrill Lynch, Care Patrol, which is placement for senior living, and the Dayna Wilson real estate team. And then our important VIP silver sponsors include Oakmont and Montecito, Mutual of Omaha Lending Reverse Mortgage, Efficiency Matters, which is organization and move management, Carlton, Pleasant Hill, and Martinez, Arosa Care, and that's in-home care, and Avadekian Law Group. All righty. So without further ado, today's topic is one of those topics that nobody ever wants to talk about. And yet it may be the most important conversation or topic that we present this year. And the topic is living with purpose, dying with dignity, and leaving a legacy. And so really what we're here to do is talk about the myths and the truths surrounding end-of-life care and planning. And, you know, there's no single guide or single conversation that can cover all the decisions that you and your family members and trusted advisors might face together. But what we can do possibly a little bit today is provide some shared understanding of what this is all about and try to make it easier to make the decisions when the time comes. And again, like everything in life, this is all very unique to you and your situation and your wishes. But sharing your end of life wishes can actually bring you closer to the people you love. And I'm sure that the panelists today can attest to that, and they see that up close and personal every single day. So I'm going to suggest you consider some of these facts. 90% of people say that talking with their loved ones about end-of-life care is important, yet 27% have actually done so. 60% of people say that making sure their family is not burdened by tough decisions is extremely important, but 56% have not communicated their end-of-life wishes. 80% of people say that if seriously ill, they would want to talk to their doctor about wishes for medical treatment before the end of their life. And 7% only have reported they've had this conversation with their doctor. And lastly, 82% of people say it's important to put their wishes in writing. But guess what? Only 23% of us have done it. So with that, we're going to kick off this topic today, and I am going to ask our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves to us. And we'll start with Stephanie West. Stephanie, who are you? What do you do, and how long have you been doing it?
I am an estate planning attorney, and my office is in Walnut Creek. I've been an attorney since 2004. I help people with their wills, trusts, probate, Medi-Cal planning, and I very much enjoy listening to people's stories and helping them get their legal housekeeping in order.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Laura Wall, introduce yourself to us, please.
Good morning. I'm Laura Wall. I'm a pre-arrangement advisor with the Neptune Society. I've been doing that for about 4.5 years. I love my job. To me, it's all about education, people's meeting with people either over the phone or in person, and just talking about their end of life wishes, which we'll do this morning. And the reason I got into it, and I'll tell you a little bit more later, but I was the executor for my dad, and this is what he wanted. And it was such a great experience. It has everything to do with why I do it.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. Nicole, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, good morning. So yes, my name is Nicole Ward, and I'm a nurse liaison with Hospice East Bay. I have been with the organization now a little over 8 years. I've been a nurse now going over 17 years. So I meet with families and patients, discuss hospice services, palliative care services, and overall ensure a quality of life and patients' symptoms are well managed at home or wherever they consider home at that time.
Wow. Well, we've got we have three VIPs here today in the room, and I think we're all going to learn a lot today. And we're going to present it in the way of myths, and then our panelists will kind of expound and expand on the truths about some of these myths. And we're going to start with Stephanie and the myth that my estate will take care of all of my funeral arrangements. Is that true?
Well, it can, but the problem is that your estate and the administration of it can be a very slow moving train. And I'm glad to know that Laura had a positive experience being an executor for her dad. And I think a lot of that might have to do, she can tell us, with the family side of it, seeing his wishes carried out. But some people find it incredibly frustrating dealing with the administrative side of things. It's just like having work done on your house. It's, takes twice as long and costs twice as much. And there's so much back and forth. And so if some of these things are not pre-planned, it can be one of those things where a beneficiary has to take out a credit card and pay for some of these things on the front end until some liquid money is available on the back end. And it is the very first thing that comes up that has to be dealt with. Some of these things, they can't wait. Money, oftentimes things can wait a little while for cooler heads to prevail or people to figure out logistics. But when you're dealing with highly emotional decisions such as funeral arrangements and what to do with someone's body, if you can have that stuff prepaid for, pre-planned, pre-done, then you can work on putting your energy in some of the other logistical things that has to happen, and you don't have to worry about fronting some of the money for some of these expenses that have to come up right away.
Got it. Okay. Okay, myth number 2 is life insurance will take care of my funeral expenses. And why don't we start with you, Laura? I know you had something to say about that.
Well, Stephanie just said it perfectly about people think, oh, I have life insurance, so I'm set, kind of like the first one, that my estate will take care of it. And she said it perfectly. It's a very emotional time. And so that life insurance money won't prevent the emotion, because people is obviously very emotional when someone passes, but they also get very opinionated. So there's disagreements among family members. And I can bet every single person listening either has had that in their family or knows of other friends and family that that's happened to. And then the other point is that people can be taken advantage of during that time because of the emotional state too. And so life insurance can go for a lot of other things, but that should not prevent you from pre-planning everything ahead of time and arranging for that, not just written down, but I mean, have it official. Can I give an example myself of, okay, I was talking about, I was my dad's executor, and I'm the youngest of 4 kids, but I was his executor. And fortunately, we all 4 knew he wanted to be cremated, and that wasn't a question. And I have 2 older brothers and an older sister, and everybody has one in every family where there's somebody a little spicy, let's say, to be nice. And so one of my older brothers said, and my dad wanted to be scattered up by the Golden Gate Bridge in Sausalito. So I called the Neptune Society. I didn't work here at the time, but I called them and arranged the whole thing. And my brother said, I want Dad with me in Santa Cruz. And I said, actually, great idea, but that's not what Dad wants. Dad wants to be scattered up by the Golden Gate Bridge. And my brother literally said, no, my idea is better and we're going to do it my way. And I was so grateful to my dad because even in death, I could show my brother, look here, here's where it says that he wants to be cremated and scattered up by the Golden Gate Bridge. And my brother backed off. So that's just an example of why it's so important to think about all this, have the discussion, and think it through in your head. And when I say have the discussion with your spouse. A lot of times when people think they want to have it with their kids, and Stephanie and Nicole can probably chime in on that one. And as Dayna said earlier, it doesn't always happen because people don't want to go there. So it's just a good idea to think what I want to do and make that happen.
Got it. Anything else about insurance, Nicole?
No.
No. Okay. Because we think life insurance would cover that, right? So,
and there are policies that cover it, but like I had said before, it just sometimes you miss checking a box, right? And that precipitates going back and forth, and sometimes the funds just aren't available. And so,
right.
And exactly what Laura said. I mean, everyone, well, you can have the Monday morning quarterbackers, right? The people who, oh, this is what somebody would have wanted. And so just as you had said, Laura, if it's literally written down, sometimes in their own handwriting, you can see what Dad said he wanted. It just, people remember that. It leaves an impression. And that could have been like a 3-year battle or a lifetime thing with your brother. That was just, that intersection was crossed the right way. And it
was brought to a head.
Discuss other things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so if your policy is assignable, it may take care of funeral expenses. I mean, every insurance policy is different. So when you pass those, so does your income stream. So this often could leave your surviving spouses or your family members in a financial hardship. So think about that as we're doing our planning. So Laura, myth, my family knows I want the cheapest funeral available. So that's what they're going to do.
Well, again, it all comes down to pre-arranging, and you'll always get the people, and there might be 1 or 2 of you listening that say, oh, just toss me in the recycle bin or the trash bin. I mean, I hear that all the time. And it's really, it's not, I have to tell people a lot of times, it's not about you. It's about the people you leave behind. And it really is some inward reflection to think about that, to make it easier for them. So when you're saying, I want the cheapest way possible, you're still leaving that very open-ended for what someone thinks is the cheapest. Someone else thinks the guilt comes in. No, we really should do this. And then the fighting starts. So again, by pre-arranging whatever it is you you decide to do. Yes, I work for the Neptune Society and cremation, but I always tell people, I'm not here to force that on you. You need to figure out what you want to do, but pre-arrange for it. So
yeah, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is. So, I mean, it's my understanding that families typically spend 2 to 3 more times. They spend 2 to 3 times more, rather, than they need to, or that their loved one would have even wanted them to. So, and again, decisions made emotionally, which we've already brought up, I think Laura and Stephanie have, tend to cost more money in the end, based on what you just said, kind of grief or guilt or whatever those emotions come up.
That's
with.
right. Can I just add, and just that emotional spending, again, going back to the whole life insurance thing, if that hasn't kicked in yet, that means someone's paying for all that.
Right. Okay. So myth, Laura, I can donate my body to science and my family won't have to worry about a thing.
Yeah, that's a nice thought too, isn't it? And I actually applaud people who want to do that. The only problem about that is that anywhere from 2 to 15% actually end up happening. It just depends on the statistic you look at. More than 85 to 98% of people are rejected. Part of it, think of right now, the pandemic, people haven't met in school. So there's a backlog of bodies, and there probably will be for a while. The other thing is people, at the end, and Nicole can attest to this, so there can be edema at the end. There can be all kinds of issues at the end that can prevent that. What if you die in another location? What if you die in another country? We all want to think we're going to go peacefully in the middle of the night in our sleep and everything's going to wrap up perfectly. It doesn't always work like that. We don't get to pick where or when. And so, just the whole donation thing typically doesn't happen. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, how about if you're donating organs? And certainly you can still donate organs. And then, for example, then we get the call or whatever it is. But as far as donating your body, it's a great idea, but it doesn't typically come into fruition.
Okay. And Nicole, I think you were gonna jump in on this one too.
Absolutely. So yes, we do have patients that have already been in process with UCSF to donate their body once they have passed. Also, our social worker through the hospice team can assist the family and the patient with coordinating all of this to ensure we try to abide by the patient's wishes. So at the time of death, we coordinate with UCSF or Stanford, that particular hospital, to ensure their body gets where it needs to go. But as Laura stated, sometimes things occur. Sometimes patients end up with new symptoms, or they end up with having swelling to where maybe their body is no longer in the right condition to be donated. But we do try our very best to ensure we follow through with the patient's wishes.
And hadn't you told me when we were speaking before that there was an example where UCSF wouldn't drive past a certain...
Oh, that was me.
Was that you? What was that?
Yeah, that was me. Well, I had a lovely, very saucy and interesting, opinionated 99-year-old client. And she had gone through the Will Body program at UCSF. And I do just want to mention too, as in addition to what Nicole just said, there are people who want to say to go to UCSF, but you actually have to fill out paperwork. It's not like someone will call UCSF and say, please come get the body. You have a thing for your wallet. You have to make contact with them. There's a process. It doesn't just automatically happen. But she actually went through the paces and was going to do it. And she had the card for her wallet, and she lived out in Brentwood, which is East Contra, Costa County, and said, they won't, I don't think they're going to come this far to get my body. I think they're only going to go to Walnut Creek. So if someone could make sure I get over to Walnut Creek, that would be great. And this kind of stuff is so funny. And it's the kind of stuff I would think in my own head, but it doesn't really work that way. And it's great to plan, and it's great to, get in touch with Stanford or UCSF or whatever it is that you want to do. But I think the idea is that there needs to be a plan B, just like for, Laura, everyone's saying it doesn't always work the way you think it's going to go. And so if there's a plan B, then that's great.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, here's another myth. 60% of veterans believe their funeral services will be covered because they served our country. Laura, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I run across that a lot, and that is not true. Part of it is they supply the real estate. So whether you want to be in a casket or you want to be in an urn, they will provide that real estate for you, your spouse, and any dependent child that passes. So it could be an older adult with special needs, that sort of thing. So if they're still dependent, but they don't pay for all the rest of the stuff, the casket, or if you choose burial, the cremation, if you choose that route, or any of the other added expenses. It would be nice if they did. And if you pass away in action, I believe they will. But if you're a veteran, then no.
Well, that's good to know. So thank you for setting that myth straight. Nicole, there's no need for a visitation or a service because I'm going to be passed away and there's no sense in spending the money.
Well, in terms of services, this is a time for closure for your friends and your family. At times, your family and friends are your primary caregiver. So they've seen you in a state where you're miserable, you're in pain. So it's a time for them to finally see you at peace. So overall, it's for your friends and family to have closure and to see you comfortable at the end of your life.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, a lot of families get scattered to the four winds, right? We move out of state for jobs or family or what have you. And, funerals or memorials or celebrations of life,
Absolutely.
along with weddings and baby showers, tend to be when the family does come together. And it can be actually a beautiful time of bonding, sad time, but also beautiful and happy when you're remembering their life. So yeah, I think that that's really, really important. It's not for the people that have passed, it's for the people that are still left behind. So Stephanie, my longevity planning is complete and I have done my will and estate plan. That's all I need to do, right?
No, that's not all. I
Oh.
mean, it's
No.
just words on a page. You got to bring it alive, right? And so many people are like, I don't even know where my estate plan is. I have people who kind of like blow the dust off of it and look at it. And that's just one side of the coin. And I think part of what this myth is getting at is not just focusing on death. Death is a part of life, and we all can accept it, even though it's painful. But I think the harder part that people don't think about, that is really hard to grasp and hard to deal with on just a day-to-day level, is if there is incapacity planning. If you have cognitive decline, if you have ALS or Parkinson's, something that you're still alive, bills still need to be paid, money is still flowing out the door, you can't do the work yourself. People have to make important decisions about your body, your care, your money, and everyone has a different opinion about when to stay at home, when to leave, 24-hour care, skilled care. I mean, any decision that you make that's financial in nature, someone else will need to do that for you if you can't do it yourself and you're alive. And that is a lot more stressful than at death. And it sounds crazy to me. I even think there's more sympathy if you're calling, somewhere and paying bills and you say, my mother's passed away, I'm sorry for your loss, condolences. And I'm not sure if some of the same feeling is given when there's incapacity, because people it just is a different situation. It's very stressful. And so it's important for everyone to think about you being alive and how things are going to work and setting things up so that it functions without too much of a blip, if there is a long or medium term period of incapacity.
Got it. Yeah, we didn't even think about that part. So wouldn't it be okay if all I did was just sort of write down my end of life wishes on a piece of binder paper or napkin, and that, I mean, that proves that that's what I wanted, right? I signed it.
I mean, a will, not so great. I've administered those, right? I've seen the back of the napkin or like the little, piece of paper that you get, and
yeah,
it's so much better if it's done correctly with a professional person, and like I said, you bring it to life, right? We talked a little bit about sharing with the people who are in your life what you want, and doing all of the housekeeping that's associated with it. So I'm sure all of us have heard that I don't care, I'll be dead, right? All the time. I mean, I hear that, I don't know, nearly every other meeting, right? When I ask a tough question that somebody doesn't have an answer to and they don't want to give the answer. And so as much as you can think these things through and share them and be thorough.
And it's meeting with people like the three of you that can help someone like me or anyone starting to want to pre-plan, right? Like
I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you at all.
No.
I've been meaning to say it, so, and it's kind of perfect what you're saying. I've never had anyone after I wrap up a meeting with them where they've done their estate planning say, oh, that was a waste, of money. They always were like, that was so great. Why didn't I do that before? And the same thing with the pre-planning, because I always, say, have you done pre-planning? Let's put the contract number on your advanced healthcare directive. You already have a plot in Dixon because you're a veteran. Make sure to write all of this stuff down so we all figure it out as we're trying to Sherlock Holmes it. But like, I've never had anyone say, oh, I can't believe I pre-planned. That was the worst decision ever. So, I mean, people feel like a sense of peace for taking care of this stuff. And so many kids or family members afterwards were like, kind of like what you said, Laura, like it was an experience that was like positive, and I did what they asked me to do. And I didn't have PTSD because I didn't know if they want to be buried or cremated. Like I took care of it. It was already done. The death certificates were paid for, like everything kind of flowed. And no one's ever going to regret spending money on that stuff.
Well, and it's like having car insurance or life insurance or anything. It is peace of mind, right? It's you just don't have to think about it, and you can just focus on living your life.
Dayna, can I say something there?
You betcha.
It's so true. When back before the pandemic, when I was seeing people more, and especially when I first started this job, so many people would stand up and give me a hug afterwards. And at first it kind of threw me off. I mean, I love hugs, but, and they said, you don't know how many years I've been wanting to get this done and haven't, or just have pushed it aside. And exactly like Stephanie said, I mean, it's all about taking a complicated time for all of this, for this whole meeting today. It's about taking a complicated time, a stressful time, and making it run smoother for those you leave behind. But guess what? It also gives you huge peace of mind knowing it's all those pieces of the puzzle are taken care of. And there's really not very many pieces to the puzzle. I mean, there's your will and your trust, right? And your healthcare directive, which is typically part of that, because that's letting people know what your wishes are for when you pass. And then also for when you do pass, cremation or burial, and all of that wraps it up. So it gives you peace of mind knowing you're giving peace of mind to those you leave behind.
That's very well said. Thank you. Well, I know as a realtor, often the adult children think, and this is a myth in real estate, that if they have power of attorney, everything will be fine and they can help sell mom and or dad's home. But yet that's not the case, because it's whoever is the trustee of the trust that actually is in charge and has the legal, ethical ability to help sell the home. But what about, Stephanie, the myth that my power of attorney gives my family permission to take care of my funeral arrangements? And then part of that, I'd love you to discuss the difference between power of attorney and a will and a trust when it comes to this pre-planning of end of life.
Yeah, I mean, kind of what Laura said, this is like, so it's like when you're estate planning, when you put together your estate planning documents, it's like a car, if you can have a motor, if you don't have a carburetor or transmission, it's not going to turn on, right? Estate planning documents, there are a series of documents, each of which are a different tool that are used so that when someone turns the key, like we actually move forward and this thing actually works. So I don't come here and say, pick a card, any card, right? Like we do the whole panoply of documents so it works. And unfortunately, you know, in the law, as in many other things, there's multiple terms for the same thing. And there is not just one document that will be our silver bullet and take care of everything. Every document allows someone to wear a different hat, and you just have to kind of learn it or just feel confident that the person has put all of that together. And so a power of attorney for finances is somebody who will make decisions for you if you are alive but can't make decisions for yourself. So a power of attorney, financial power of attorney, dies with you. So if people are under this impression, I know you mentioned this too, Dayna, that the power of attorney for finances continues to work. So people will go into the bank or try to do a real estate transaction after someone has passed away because they think, well, I'm power of attorney, I can do all of this, but it doesn't work anymore. That's just the nature of that particular document. Could someone who is an agent under a power of attorney do funeral expenses for an incapacitated person? Yes, while they're alive, right? They could, but you can't use it to do those things after the fact through that particular document, right? So I'm happy to explain the difference between a will and trust if you'd like me to do that now.
Why don't you? Because again, in relation to the pre-planning, right?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between basically a will and a trust is it works during incapacity as well. But one of the primary reasons that people do a trust is because they want to avoid having to go through the court system if they become incapacitated or after their death. So you're setting up your own little mini company, your own little entity. You're the CEO of this, and you set this up and you make it so that you can pass the baton, right? If something happens to you, and people can continue without court involvement to take care of the things that you would have wanted to have taken care of. That's the primary reason why people do a trust. And all of these documents together just come along for the ride to help people in different situations make things work more smoothly and give them the authority they need to take care of business.
And then for the sake of the people that are attending today, where does the will come in then? If we've talked about the POA that disappears after you pass, and the trust, which is your own little kingdom, telling everybody what to do, what is the will good for?
So of course, I'm going back to my statement. There's not just one flavor. We're 31 flavors here, in the American legal system. So there's different kinds of wills. So if you don't have a trust at all, your primary document for your death is your last will and testament. And this is what people think of when they think about television. You all hear you all come in, we're going to read the will, and this is who's going to get what. Right. If you have no trust, then your will, if you have one, is your primary document that says how things are going to go. And that goes through the court system. If you have a trust, then your trust is like the primary document, and the will is your little sidekick, and that's called a pour over will. And so the pour over will just says, hey, most of the time, it says, hey, don't look at me if some apples fell off the truck and we forgot to take care of some of those loose ends, which happens in life. Pour it back into my trust. And so it's a feedback mechanism, because usually the trust is that primary document that says where you want things to go. And then the last thing I'll just point that a will does, which is a completely separate thing and might not be of interest to most of the people here, but they may have children who are interested in this, but the will is the mechanism that we nominate the guardians to our minor children. And so for some people, all that will is, hey, don't look at me, look at the trust. But for people with minor children, it's important for them to nominate the minors of the guardians of their minor children.
Very, very important, actually. Thank you. Wow, I like that. That was a good explanation. Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, Nicole, because the myth that we all kind of buy into is that enrolling in hospice means giving up on living.
Absolutely not. So enrolling onto hospice means now you're focusing on your quality of life versus quantity. You're focusing on remaining at home, being around your loved ones, not going back into the hospital in hopes of not going back into the emergency room. So in terms of services, I do want to explain hospice services versus palliative care services. I think there's
Perfect.
a lot of confusion between the two.
Mhm.
So in terms of hospice, it's when there are two doctors that provide a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. And once again, it's staying at home, not going into the hospital, being able to live your life while knowing you have a service available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that can come to your home and provide the care. Whereas palliative care, it's a physician, nurse practitioner led program provided for patients with a chronic illness, more or less of a life expectancy of 3 years or less, focusing on goals. While patients are still seeking aggressive treatment, but having that additional layer of care, being able to know they can contact a nurse telephonically, having a physician come into the home, focusing on their pain, or maybe it's a new diagnosis of dementia, educating the family on what to expect, knowing that maybe the changes of your spouse, this is normal with the disease process.
Wow. That's good to know. I love this. I'm learning. I love this. I learn every month. I'm learning tons. So I love these seminars as well. So let's continue on, Nicole, about the myth that hospice means that I have to leave my home for an inpatient facility and give up my primary care doctor.
Not at all.
Oh,
Not
good.
at all. Our goal is to keep you at home. Our goal is to ensure we are readily available around the clock for any needs, any changes of conditions, new or worsening symptoms. And you actually do have an option. You can keep your primary care doctor, and we will contact them as the attending physician under hospice services, as long as they agree, of course. So this physician will be our go-to doctor to ensure we keep them up to date. They will provide any type of medication changes or new orders that we may need to ensure a very smooth level of care for you at this time. But in terms of an inpatient home, they are available, in which there is the Bruns House located in Alamo. But this is solely for patients that have been at home, or maybe they're in the hospital and they've decided to start hospice services, or they've already been on hospice services, but their symptoms are not being managed, where they're now requiring a registered nurse around the clock, but solely for a short-term stay. Just approximately 2 to 4 days, where you go to the inpatient unit. We would control your symptoms, and then we will get you right back home with continued hospice services at that time.
Oh, well, do you want to tell me a little bit more about what the Bruns House is? And I think you had some stories about that too.
I would love to. Bruns House definitely has a special place in my heart. So as I mentioned, it is located in Alamo, and the Bruns House was actually donated to Hospice East Bay in 2004 from the Bruns family, where we transitioned the home for our patients to go just for that short-term stay, requiring that symptom management. So it is a maximum of 6 patients at any time. Each patient has their own room. There at the Bruns House, it's around the clock care. So you have a registered nurse on each shift. We have licensed vocational nurses. We have our social workers, a spiritual counselor, and volunteers. Well, in terms of some memories or some stories there at the Bruns House, we try our best to provide families with an amazing experience. And we had a patient where she admitted to the Bruns House, and her daughter was planning on getting married. And unfortunately, this patient was not going to be able to go to her daughter's wedding. So what did we do? We went and took the daughter to get a wedding dress. We decorated the Bruns house. We got flowers donated, and we had their family and friends come to the backyard, and the daughter and the spouse, they got married. And the patient passed shortly after that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps. I mean, that's like a movie. What a beautiful thing.
It is. It's amazing. We had one patient where her wish was just to see her horse one last time. So we got her horse to the Bruns house and to the side of the house, and she was able to see her horse through the window. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
It's amazing.
But go ahead.
I sorry, I just wanted to say, I have heard of the Bruns house because I have clients who have left the Bruns house in their estate plan of bequest. And, I have so many clients who left hospice money in their estate plan because when something happened to their kids or their spouse or whoever that loved one was in their life who had hospice, the care that they got was so impressionable, so amazing that they wanted to make sure that money was left to those organizations. And what you do is so incredibly important, and it just is a ripple effect of goodness, and people want to pay it forward because you guys did too.
It is an amazing service if and when the time comes, right? But a lot of families I've encountered, it's gee, Nicole, I wish we would have started services a lot sooner for mom or for dad, not realizing exactly what is provided and under the hospice benefit.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the next myth, which is hospice is expensive, and really my family wouldn't be able to afford it. What do you say to that myth?
Well, let me tell you, it's covered 100% under your Medicare benefits,
Wow.
as well as under your private insurances, because under hospice, we do see patients 18 and older. So we run your insurance. We will confirm if there are any out-of-pocket expenses, but typically there is not. And what's nice under us for being a not-for-profit, we do provide hospice services for patients that don't have the ability to pay.
Wow.
Dayna, can I say something here?
Yes, jump in.
The other part that hospice does, my mom went on hospice July of 2020, and she graduated March of 2021, which I fought to get her longer. I was trying to keep her on hospice because hospice was so fabulous. And I was excited to see her go on hospice because I understand what hospice means. And my stepfather, who's a saint and trying to care for her, just wasn't doing a good enough job. So it was nice for us to know that she was being seen by a nurse, and then it was really helpful for him because they also had I believe a non-denominational chaplain that came and met, I think it was weekly or maybe it wasn't that often, every couple times with my stepfather. And for my stepfather to be home all day with my mom, it really provided him peace of mind too, of having someone to talk to. So it's not just for the patient, and people do, I think, wait too long. It's really for the family. It gave me peace of mind because I knew she was being well cared for. It gave my stepdad a break and peace of mind, knowing he wasn't going crazy and what to do. So it really helps and benefits the whole family. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Well, and I'm going to skip over, Nicole, let's talk about myth number 14, which is hospice care. And this is what Laura is talking about, is just about treating the dying person or a person with cancer, right? Those are the myths that we kind of understand.
So absolutely, that is incorrect. So hospice services is for patients with any terminal diagnosis of a prognosis of 6 months or less. So this could be, yes, your cancer, but it also could be your dementia. It could be Alzheimer's. It could be Parkinson's.
Okay.
And
what about
all the time as well?
And Laura was saying that again, because the myth is it's just about treating the person that's passing away. And really it's a gift to the caregivers and family members, which Laura's attesting to. Is there anything else you could comment on that? myth?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, Laura, you are correct. We're not only here for our patients, but families and primary caregivers as well. And if you don't mind, Dana, I would like you just to go over some of the team members that would come in to visit for hospice care. So for hospice care, there's going to be a few individuals coming into the home or wherever the patient considers their residence at that time. You'll have a registered nurse and a licensed vocational nurse coming out to visit approximately 1 to 2 times a week, just to head to toe assessment, training your caregivers, making sure you're comfortable, looking at your medications and ordering them if needed. There's a home health aide, and I think this is huge for primary caregivers and families. They come in and provide personal care, so activities of daily living, such as a bed bath or getting a patient into the shower, changing their bed linens, washing their hair. And we also do have our spiritual care coordinator that would come in and talk about spiritual wishes. And we have the social worker that will assist with navigating the healthcare system. And that's where we would contact Laura or Stephanie if a patient needs assistance in end of life planning. So an advanced directive, if a patient has questions about long-term care policies, maybe being at home is no longer ideal. So Dana, maybe we'll contact you just to see if we can assist them with this entire process at the end of their life.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Because I remember when I reached out to hospice, and unfortunately things moved too quickly and we never were able to utilize their services. But when my dad was passing away, and they were explaining what they would do. I mean, they were even asking about, gosh, do you need help with bookkeeping or writing bills? It's like, you would do all that? And it's like, we'll do anything we need to support you and your family. And it's just, it's amazing. It's amazing. Wow. Well, so the myth is that all hospice providers are the same. And just like everything in life, no two companies or service providers tend to be the same. But could you speak to that a little bit, that myth that you're all the same?
So we are here to provide a service. But there are your for-profit hospice organizations and there's your not-for-profit hospice organizations. And in terms of your not-for-profit, from my experience, I know we have received grants. So we were able to actually bring in a musical therapist. And this musical therapist comes into the patient's home and studies the genre of music the patient and family enjoys, and they sing at the bedside. We also have a Give Me a Break grant. So a financial assessment is done, and this is where we are able to provide caregiver relief. It may be a couple days throughout the week, but it's additional support for the patient and family.
That is so cool. And by the way, to the attendees listening in, Nicole has provided a link to the musical therapist. So we're going to be sending that along with some other goodies in the follow-up email after this session. And I can't wait to watch it. I didn't have time to watch it before, but that's really cool. Okay, let's see. So let's jump to the myth that my doctor will talk to me about hospice when it's time. So I don't have to think about it. My doctor's going to know when to talk to me. So Stephanie, do you want to take this first?
Sure. I mean, I think that I do think that hospitals and hospital systems have become much better at asking clients, do you have an advanced care directive? Like Kaiser literally was calling my clients asking for them to submit their directive. And so they would call me and I'd get it sent in. And I think that kind of affirmative work on the front end is great. And I think there are a lot of strides to get the housekeeping in order so that when the time comes, Kaiser, John Muir, Stanford, they know who to call and what to ask. But there is still a lot of bureaucracy. There's still a lot of advocating that you need to do on your own behalf, or that someone needs to do on your behalf when the time comes. And one of those things is, bringing up, filling out a pulse, going through what that means, or talking about hospice, because, you're, like I said, you're your own CEO of your own business. And, you can't wait for someone else to bring that stuff up. If you think it's time, these are things that you need to initiate, and then the dominoes will fall, right?
Absolutely.
Got it. Nicole, do you have anything to add?
I do. And I highly recommend just educating yourself earlier than later, really finding out what is hospice, what is palliative care, because things can change so quickly. Patients can have a quick decline, things transpire. And in terms of your doctor will have the conversation with you, but sometimes it's a little bit too late because the typical person sees their physician maybe once or twice a year. But during those other, say 10, 11 months, there's things that may change. Are you having weight loss? Have you been into the emergency room? Have you had a change in your activities of daily living? Are you now requiring more help? Have you decided to stop treatment options? And so that's why it's important to really know what's out there for you, what the options are, so you start these services sooner than later.
Oh, that's awesome. And also, I think a lot of doctors wait until the patients bring it up.
Absolutely, because for a physician, I can't speak for everyone, but their goal is to prolong a patient's life as long as possible, to aggressively treat their patients.
Interesting. Well, Stephanie, the myth is that my family knows my wishes and will do what I want after I die.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a little bit with Laura. There's always Monday morning quarterbacks, right? And it's great when something is written down, or maybe the person, like things move quickly. Like Nicole said, people may have changed their mind over time, right? What was once made sense for something under a certain circumstance, may not make sense. And if things aren't written down, and you haven't talked to people recently, then it can cause, so many problems within your family. It's important that you have things both written down, that would be excellent, and to consistently tell different people. If you tell your son that you want to do X, Y, and Z, and then you tell your daughter, I want to do A, B, and C, then at some point that will come to a head. And a lot of times people do just want to do what the parent wanted. And if what the parent wanted had changed, or there were different stories, then those kind of issues can cause problems within the family for years to come, right? And I would say, I had said earlier that, nobody leaves my office saying, oh, I'm so sad I pre-planned, or I'm so sad I did this. People want peace in their family. People want for the relationships to continue in a peaceful manner. I mean, that's why you have a family. And so if there were any divisions or fissures that were there previously, this kind of stress could make it worse. And so, like I think you had said, Dayna, it's a time for people to come together, right? When you were talking about that. And sometimes I hear the worst scenarios, like the funeral was terrible because someone didn't show up, right? Or they didn't prepare a speech, or they came late, or they didn't show the kind of respect. And, if you want things to go as smoothly as they can under trying circumstances, then having things clear and written down is one of the best ways that you can do that.
Yeah. And I know that you're mentioning, I think we're mostly mentioning, adult children and parents, and yet this could be spouse to spouse, right? I was talking to another attorney that said that they were dealing with the husband that had passed and the second wife, and then came the battle with the second wife and the stepkids.
Oh, that's an age-old issue for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, our families are so complex, right? We have stepchildren, we have second wives. I was doing an advanced care directive with a retired physician with the second wife right there. And I was like, so do you want to be cremated and your ashes put next to your first wife or your second wife? And I had to ask because I knew that would come up, and she is younger than him and is likely to outlive him. And I didn't want there to be a problem because the kids were his from the prior marriage. That was a very good one. his prior wife had died.
Yeah.
And so I wanted him, as hard as that was, to make that decision right there. And he did.
Good. And we won't ask what the decision was.
Yeah, right. It's okay.
We don't need to know. We don't need to know.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, Laura, if I own a burial plot, that's all I really need, right? I've got the real estate. I'm good.
Well, I laugh because, okay, we all live in the East Bay, actually, and it's so expensive here. The burial plots are so expensive here. So that is a good chunk of it. But I laugh just because that isn't all of it. I mean, obviously, sometimes families have had burial plots for years and years, because back in the day when it was so inexpensive, people bought plots for the whole family. You know, now it's just outrageous. In fact, if you are listening and you want to be buried and you don't have a burial plot, I would really encourage you to get one, because they are so expensive. And I know several families that, yes, my mom, my dad, my spouse wanted to be buried, but we don't have the money for that. So we're doing cremation. So there are a lot of other costs associated with that. I mean, caskets can range, if inexpensively, $3,500 and north of $20,000. Then you have the grave digger. Then you have the company that makes the tombstone, the different company that installs the tombstone. You know, there's just a lot of other costs associated with it. So again, it goes back to pre-planning. Whatever it is that you choose is to make it happen, and not just write it down on a piece of paper, but to actually get that, like Stephanie said, working with her and answering those hard questions, because you'll skim over those. Or again, with me, having a plan in place, or whatever it is, to not just kind of think it in your head and tell your spouse, your loved one, but making it happen.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, the myth is that dying is free and easy, right? You know, we all, and you already said this in the very beginning, and this is what everybody in my family says. Well, we all want to die in our sleep. And I'll give you a story that my great grandma was 94, and she, you know, we women in our family, you know, we like to have our hair and makeup done. And she had just had her hair done, and she was lying in bed, and her 4 sons were all around her, and they were from all different, you know, one lives in Europe, and they were all there. I think it was her birthday, or it was around her birthday. And she looked up and she looked at all of them and said, "I love you," and then closed her eyes and got her wings, and off she went. And so, of course, we all want to do what Nana did. We just assume that's what's going to happen, right?
Well, here's an opposite story of that.
Okay.
Is, and this was a client, maybe 8 years ago or so. And this happens more than you think. Again, we don't get to be like Nana. A lot of times we don't get to pick where and when. And we all love to travel around here, right? We do. And wherever it is you are, well, she happened to be going to Israel.
Mm.
And fortunately, before she left, she got her program in place with us. And so she was set. She unexpectedly passed away in Israel. Well, guess what? Israel doesn't believe in cremation. Okay. So we went in, did everything, handled all the red tape and paperwork, which was a lot because they don't believe in cremation as a country. Got her out to a neighboring country, got her back to her family. But this is 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. 8 to 10 years ago. The bill on that. Sorry,
Times.
the bill on that then was would have been $22,000. Okay, it didn't cost her family a dime more, because she had already taken care of that ahead of time.
Wow.
So my point is that whether you're in Israel or wherever you are, and you're thinking, oh, I have this plot here that goes back to what I was saying earlier. But if you die someplace else, that means your body has to be shipped here. Who's paying for that? You know, it just goes back to, so you have Nana and you have the other 180-degree difference, but it's realistic. You have to think of all of them.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and so this is sort of this myth that only people over 65 are even interested in pre-planning, or maybe people over 75 or even older. But maybe address that myth and then talk about, has COVID changed or maybe not changed how people are addressing pre-planning? And let's start with you, Laura, on that one.
Oh, it definitely has. And I think in a positive way, just because COVID, as we all know, isn't just targeting people over 65 or whatever the age, it's hitting everybody. And so it's really helped people think, oh, maybe I won't live till 95 and pass away in my sleep. So I better make plans for, again, so that if something happens to me. So I think it's a good thing. It's really increased our business, but I think it's a good thing because we don't get out of here. We don't get a, get out of death free card or whatever it is. It's a part of life. So it is important to do. So COVID has really brought that to people's attention, I think, even more.
Yeah. But Stephanie, has it changed the way you do your practice?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change how I do my practice, but it, definitely people react to what's going on in the world. And when COVID first started and all of us had to wash pens and, we didn't know what was going on, right? Like, how do you get it? People were calling me and were like, I mean, these stories like leave such an impression, right? Like the one Laura just told about Israel. But like, people would call in a panic because they think they were going to die. And I don't really like my husband. I never liked him. And I want to leave everything to the kids. Can you draw something up for me right now? And it's like, no, this is panic mentality here, right? And as things have slowly, we've gone through, the trials and tribulations of COVID-19, like people are still definitely thinking about death and incapacity more and about revisiting their planning. Like I had someone who was in John Muir for 5 weeks on a ventilator and he was thinking, I haven't updated my trust. And so when he got out, and he was very happy he got out, and this is someone I consider young, like he's in his 50s. He called me, he's like, we need to revisit and get our stuff back in order again. And so people are thinking about it a lot more, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I even noticed, I mean, I've had the busiest year ever in my real estate practice, partially because obviously our home values are skyrocketing through the roof. But I think, again, the pandemic has brought to light the fact that life is short. And so do we want to keep living here? A lot of my clients are not only moving out of the area, they're moving out of the state. And I've had a couple move out of the country because they're following their dreams and they're saying, why are we waiting? What are we waiting for? Because again, life is short. And I guess if we went to the local, probably, Contra Costa health department, and we looked at the cause of death in the county, I would guess that there's going to be more deaths from heart disease, from lung disease, from accidents. I mean, cancer, that impacts people at any age. So this pre-planning is not just about, oh gosh, oh, look at the time, I'm 75 now, I guess we better start thinking about, end of life planning. It could happen to anything can happen to anybody at any time. So I think, again, that's why this conversation is so important. Nicole, has the good old pandemic changed the way you are able to have like a high touch interaction with your patients? Is anything changed with that regard?
Well, of course, in the beginning, because for my position, I love to meet with the patients and families face to face. It's more personable. And so initially it was a lot via Zoom or over the phone, but it's opened up a lot more now. People are more comfortable with us coming into their home. They're at the hospital. I will meet with them at the bedside. As you probably know, at this time, they're at the hospitals, they're designating one individual to visit. So it's having to still call one family member, but be face to face with another family member. And in terms of our visits from our clinicians, it was for us just to get in the swing of things. So getting all of our PPE equipment and speaking with the patients and families, explaining our processes on how we're going to keep them safe as well, that we are gowning and gloving, we're sanitizing, just to make sure that they're comfortable and that they know that they're safe. So a lot of communication, a lot of education during these past, say, give or take almost 2 years, I think, year and a half.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything that I have failed to ask you three that you would like to bring up now? And then I'm also going to suggest to the attendees, if you have any questions, if you bring your mouse and hover over the bottom black section of our four faces, there's a Q&A. And if you wanted to type in any questions, you can do so there. You can also, of course, reach out to any of us at a later date and have a one-on-one consultation or ask your questions. You may think of something down the road, but I just wanted to ask Stephanie and Laura and Nicole, is there anything I forgot to bring up that came to mind while we were chatting together?
So I would like to bring something up if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Great.
And I know Laura, you spoke on it a little bit, but in terms of even admitting onto hospice services, we do have patients that graduate. We do have patients that outlive their prognosis of 6 months, so meaning they're no longer meeting criteria to remain on hospice. Or we have patients that will discontinue services because, say, maybe the clinical trial came up or they want to go into the hospital, and you have that right to do so. So just by enrolling onto hospice, you're not binded by us by no means. And also what I like to tell patients and families, by being on hospice, you are in control. Everything is about you. Your entire care plan is centered about you and what's going on, your symptoms, but overall, just to ensure just an amazing quality of life.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you know, the topic, the title of today's topic was living with purpose and leaving a legacy. And, you know, we have been focused on end of life, but, you know, I think the myth, and when I talk to my own mom, she buys into this. She's, you know, she says, oh, I don't have a legacy to leave. I just lived a normal, boring life. Well, that is so not the case. Everyone leaves a legacy, right? Everyone does. And some are just more purposeful about it than others. And so I think part of this planning is living with purpose, because if you're pre-planning, either through paperwork or through, you know, your end of life wishes through hospice, or now you're gone and now what's going to happen, you know, through cremation or burial, whatever. You know, I'm going to read this from, I love this book. You can see that I've read it, How to Say It to Seniors. But I love this book because it's not just about seniors, it's just about people in general. But if you're thinking of someone's legacy, think of it as an enormous quilt created not from scraps of cloth material, but from moments of emotional material gathered from a lifetime of memories, examined for content, quality, and values, re-examined from the perspective of older age, and then sewn together in an enveloping garment that reflects the values the person holds most dear, his or her essential perceptions, memories, and truths that must be passed along to future generations. And we've been talking about myths and truths today, which I thought that this sort of wrapped it up with a nice big red bow. So I'm just going to challenge everybody, including us, to think about the footprint or the imprint that we want to leave. And while we're living, you know, how do we continue to live with purpose? You know, what are we doing to give meaning to our lives? Because life is short and it's so very precious. And so we started the year with living to be 100. And that the fact was that most of us don't even intend or think for a second we're going to live to be 100, and yet more and more people are. And so we talked a lot about how do we live with purpose, and part of that was, you know, continuing to be useful, lifelong learning, volunteering, so all those things. So I'm just going to sort of end this with, we're talking about end of life, which is important, and it's just part of planning life and death. But, what are we doing today and tomorrow to continue to live with meaning and purpose? We all have a passion. Maybe it's gardening, maybe it's your grandkids, doesn't really matter what it is. But, life is great. And so just remember to be grateful for all the things that we have today. And, we're all here for you. If you have questions, give us a buzz. And I'm going to see, I think we've got one little question here. It's from Anonymous. Where can we find more information about each of your services? Do you have websites or other places to check out? Much of what you have said, each of what you have said has been very informative, and I did not know about it. So again, we're going to have website links. We're going to provide some information for everyone in a follow-up email that you should get no later than the end of Friday. And so we're just going to end with thank you, ladies, so very much. Your time is precious. Thank you, Stephanie West and Laura Wall and Nicole Ward. Pleasure having you today. And for everyone else listening in, we will see you in December for the last topic on Zoom. And I just wish everyone a wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Dayna. Bye.
Bye.
Well,